Right. Okay, it seems we are well comfortable with the previous knowledge area we have covered. The first knowledge area we covered in last 2 days was project integration management. Rather, we had spent some time earlier than that on understanding the standard for project management, in which included the interrelationship between the project management knowledge areas and process groups, and we completely understood how all the things are happening, all the processes are interacting with each other. What are the major inputs and outputs of each process? This we have understood. I said if you understand that, probably your rest of the body of knowledge would be piece of cake for you. The only thing you need to learn in every knowledge area is some that knowledge area specific things, the tools and techniques and all that. Otherwise, the flow you might have well understood, and that would not be any more difficult. So today we start with project scope management. Again, a very important knowledge area, and after integration, which has the responsibility of overall integrating all the knowledge areas and all the processes, this knowledge area plays also a very important role. Well, scope is that knowledge area which establishes what the project is set out to do. And without understanding the scope of the project, you probably cannot do nothing about anything subsequently. You cannot have a schedule, you cannot have cost, you cannot have any knowledge area properly calculating or understanding or planning anything. So, in scope, we need to understand a number of things. Uh, Naturally, the format we are going to follow is exactly according to the PMBOK guide. First of all, we will have an overview of this project scope management. Key concepts are going to be discussed. Trends and emerging practices will be discussed. Any tailoring considerations possible, and any consideration specifically for agile and adaptive environment. This is the general format we'll follow for every knowledge area. Then we'll talk about the specific processes of project scope management, and we have got 6 processes. Interestingly, the first 4 processes, plan scope management, collect requirements, define scope, and create WBS, they are all happening in planning. We don't have anything in initiation, we don't have anything in execution, and we do not have anything in closing. But in monitoring and control, we have 2 processes, validate scope and control scope. Now, I need not explain it to you why we do not have any scope process in initiation, in execution, or in closing, because I understand that you would have a clarity on that. So, should I be asking you now why we don't have that? Okay, one more thing. I was just reminded. Uh, just tell me, there was a suggestion that we should have a WhatsApp group of this the people who are attending this class. So I intended to ask you all if you are interested to form this WhatsApp group, because I do not have any numbers of all of you with me. So if at all you want to have a WhatsApp group, you can form it yourself, or you can give me your numbers and I can put it all together. So all those of you who are interested in having a WhatsApp group of this class, please raise hands. Okay, everybody, fine, very, very, very nice. So, will it be nice if you people can, you know, share your numbers with me or with any one of yourselves, and we all can form part of that group. If you can send me, not on the chat, if you can send me by email your email addresses. I know I have email addresses of most of you. maybe all of you, but I don't have numbers of all of you. So whichever number is registered on WhatsApp, if you can send me by email, I can form the group. Or you can, by the way, we can do that on chat also. But at the end of the lecture, as if we don't mix up the things being discussed here in the class with that. So you can write your name and your registered WhatsApp number in the chat at the end of the lecture, not now. Don't do that now. At the end of the class. So before we leave, I will create the WhatsApp group and send you a message, and then we will break off the class. Right? Right. Thanks for this, and I have interrupted you. So let's get back to it. Okay, I was trying to ask you, do you understand why we only have processes in planning and monitoring and control? Anyone who wants to explain why do we not have any process in initiation, in execution, and in closing? Please raise hands, any one of you. Okay. Nobody is interested to talk. Right. What if Azim, can you tell me? Azimul Haq.
Um,
Ji,
because
Sam.
in initiating Assalamu alaikum. In initiating we are developing charter, and based on the charter the project existence come into being, and in planning the project management plan, develop project management plan starts. So before having the project management plan we don't have anything except charter, so that's why most of the processes in the
Hmm. But normally people think that
knowledge
uh,
areas are in.
normally with the argument which I have
and
from
and
various Azim, the argument I have from various people are that don't we have a scope in initiation? We do have some scope. So why don't we have a scope process?
we have brief scope.
Hmm.
We have this brief scope, but that is part of the charter.
That is part of the charter. Wonderful, wonderful. Yes, and why
Yes.
don't we have anything in
And
execution?
executing, because we have these cost and schedule and cost and scope baselines in planning, so
Hmm.
we don't need that. We will stick to those baselines, and that we are already having in the project management plan.
They
And
are
in the
integrated.
closing,
Hmm.
yeah, they are integrated. In closing, we are, because we are doing project closure, and that is being done in the integration management knowledge area.
Mm.
So we don't need to have anything for the scope in closing group.
Wonderful, 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 wonderful. Right. So you all have heard. This is the reason. First of all, yes, there is a scope in initiation, but as such, scope management knowledge area does not come into play because that scope is encapsulated into the charter, and charter is basically the responsibility of integration management. So, though there might be a little rollabout scope, but that scope is covered by integration, and as such, individually scope management knowledge area does not come into play in initiation. In planning, it comes into play in full form because without having planned the scope thoroughly, we cannot even move ahead with any of the knowledge areas. That's why scope was to be established, and once after create WBS, once the planning is complete, that is the point where scope baseline is formed. And this scope baseline is then integrated into the project management plan, which will be integratedly executed by direct and managed project. Yeah, I'm sorry we lost the voice. Sharia wanted to say something.
No, sir. Just I wanted to say about the voice. There was no
Okay,
voice.
okay, okay, wonderful. So I'm sorry about the loss of voice. But anyways, I was talking about that in initiation we don't need scope as explained already by Azim, and in execution, because the responsibility of executing the scope, time, and cost uh, is taken over by integration in form of the performance measurement baseline, which includes the scope baseline, schedule baseline, and cost baseline. Therefore, we do not have any process in execution as far as scope is concerned, because scope is not to be executed separate from others, is all the baselines have to be collectively executed. Therefore, it is a responsibility of integration. So again, integration takes on this responsibility. And in closing, we don't need any other knowledge area. Integration is responsible for closing the project or phase. So therefore, as far as scope is concerned, we have the presence of the scope processes only in planning and in monitoring and control. So same is true for schedule. We have got scheduling processes only in planning and monitoring and control, and same is true for cost. We have cost processes in planning and monitoring and control. Therefore, except for these three items, these three knowledge areas, others have a little different behavior, because all of these three areas, scope, time, and cost, they have the baseline, and the behavior is almost the same. So what does happen in planning? Naturally, we first of all in 5.1 we develop the scope management plan, and not only the management plan of scope, but as you remember, I have told you earlier that there are two management plans which are created. One is the scope management plan, which is the overall management plan of the scope. But there is one more thing we are doing which is very crucial, and that is collection of requirements. And requirement is so sensitive an issue, though is covered under scope, but management of requirement itself with the stakeholders is a very heavy duty, and there is a lot of change going on in requirements. So there have to be a separate requirements management plan created, and that plan is also created in the 5.1 process, which is plan scope management. So the result of plan scope management is not one but two management plans. One is the main one is the scope management plan, and the other one is the requirement management plan. Once we are um, collecting the requirement, naturally the details of managing the requirement and detailed instructions about requirements are enclosed in the requirement management plan. But because requirement is part of overall the scope management plan, so scope management plan also applies to collect requirements. So both of these management plans will be required for collecting the requirements. Then when we move on to define scope, uh, so at that point, requirements are no more required to be identified, because whenever we need to collect the requirements, even again, we will come back to this process of collect requirements, and there we will require both the management plans, requirement management plan and the scope management plan. But for defining the scope, we will develop here the scope statement, and here we do not need requirement management plan anymore. So scope management plan will be fine, and keeping the requirement documentation in front of us and the scope management plan in mind, we can develop a scope statement which will describe the scope of the project in detail. This is the maximum detail about scope you can find in any document. This is called the scope statement, and this is created here. So once the scope statement is created, some of the people mistake it by calling it uh, statement of work or scope of work, SOW. This is not SOW. Scope statement is a different thing. Scope statement is about the whole project, and there is nothing like scope of work, because scope of work You may be using it in your organization. There might be a name for the same thing, scope statement, but some people confuse it with statement of work, and statement of work is altogether a different kind of a thing. Statement of work is something we will study in procurement. When we are trying to outsource anything, when we decide that this item or this work has to be outsourced, that is a time when we develop a statement of work for that specific portion of work. That is called statement of work. So this that is not scope of work. SOW may be a misnomer here. But anyways, once the scope statement has been created, that means the scope has been thoroughly elaborated. The only thing remains is to develop a work breakdown structure, which is done in 5.4. 5.4 is create work breakdown structure. Work breakdown structure means that we are breaking down the project into smaller parts until we get to the work packages. Work packages are considered to be the smallest or the lowest part of this hierarchy of work breakdown structure. These are not tasks or activities. This is a level above tasks or activities. Task and activity is one and the same thing. So it is a level above the activity, and this is a package of work which may include a number of activities. Although we can break it down to the activity level, but as far as the requirement of the scope is concerned, it is enough if we can subdivide it down to the work package level. So we'll talk about what our package is. So this is of all we have to do in planning about scope. So you see, we initially had the scope management plan and requirement management plan, which will go into the project management plan. Then we collected the requirements, and out of the requirements, we got two major outputs, and those are the requirement documentation and the requirement traceability matrix. I mentioned that requirement traceability matrix earlier. Requirement traceability matrix is a kind of a table which shows us the linkage of the every requirement with the source. Who has given this requirement? Why have they given this requirement? How it has evolved into what it is now, and the linkage forward in the future, how this requirement will be fulfilled, what are the activities which are to be done to fulfill this requirement, and which how does it affect the objectives of the project, and who are the people responsible for fulfilling this requirement, and so on and so forth. So by a requirement traceability matrix, I can trace every requirement backwards to the source and forward to the ultimate result it is producing. So this is a very important document. Both of these documents, the requirement documentation and the requirement traceability metrics, are not part of the project management plan, and they will be submitted into the project document archive. Then the scope statement we create in 5.3. This scope statement is the major output of defined scope. There might be many inputs and outputs, but we are concerned over here about the major output. What is the major thing coming out of it? So the major output is scope statement, and this is really a major output because this is also part of the scope baseline which we will be creating at the end of 5.4, create WBS. So based on this scope statement, when we develop the work breakdown structure, which is a hierarchical chart, and we'll talk about it and we'll see how it looks like. This breakdown structure uh, is also going to be part of the scope baseline. But there is one more thing which is created when the WBS is created, and that is we create another table in which we list down all the work packages and briefly describe them. So this list is called work uh, WBS dictionary. WBS dictionary is what? It is a list of all the work packages along with its description. So these three items, the scope baseline, the WBS, and the WBS dictionary, these actually will form the scope baseline. So that means the planning work of scope is complete. Now, moving over to the monitoring and control, we have two processes there, validate scope and control scope. If you remember correctly, Validate scope is dealing with, anyone who can tell me what is validate scope meant for? Hafiz Muhammad Asim, please, can you tell me? What is the purpose of validate scope? Hafiz Muhammad Asim. I know others are also raising hands, but let me first see if Asim replies. Okay, Faisal, you tell me.
सर ये बेसिकली डिलीवरेबल को वैलिडेट करता है, मीन एक्सेप्टेंस ऑफ डिलीवरेबल है सर.
Acceptance of delivery, right, right. शाहिद साहब आप बताइए.
जी सर. सर जैसे अभी एक दोस्त ने मेंशन किया एक्सेप्टेंस ऑफ डिलीवरेबल्स हैं, तो
Right.
वैलिड स्कोप बेसिकली ये है कि आपने जो भी आपकी जो कंप्लीटेड एक्टिविटीज हैं डिलीवरेबल्स को आप वेरीफाई कर रहे हैं, वैलिडेट कर रहे हैं.
जी. Right. So, very nice, both of you. Thank you for your right correct response. Yes, actually, um, validate scope deals with the deliverable. And if you remember, after execution, when the deliverable comes out of execution from direct and managed project work and enters the monitor and control, there are only two processes which deal with the deliverable. The first inspection is the quality control, which verifies the deliverable for its correctness. And once this inspection is passed, the second inspection is validate scope. Validate scope is the user acceptance testing or the final inspection which validates the deliverable, or you can call the output as an accepted deliverable. That means either the customer himself has checked and inspected it and approved it, or they have given us the authority on a checklist or something. So this is the test, this is the inspection for completeness of the product. Quality was the correctness of the product. The validate scope is for completeness of the product, and after the user acceptance testing has been done, the product is ready to be delivered to the customer now, which will be done by closed project process. So this is the role of the validate scope, and control scope has the conventional role, receiving the work performance data from execution and the project management plan from planning, and comparing both of these things from the perspective of the scope, finding any variances, doing the trend analysis, doing any further analysis, forecasting or whatever, and ultimately, if converting the work performance data it has received into work performance information, which will be sent to work performance information is sent to monitor and control project work, which will consolidate into work performance report. Moreover, control scope, if it finds that whatever the analysis it has done, it clearly shows that any one of the project objectives has been, affected by it, and there needs to be a change request. Change request can be launched from control scope, and change request will go to perform integrated change control. And if that change request is approved, then the requisite project management plan or the project documents will be updated, and information is passed on to execution as if this change has been approved, and now they have to consult the latest version of documents to follow in all subsequent execution processes. So this is a brief summary of the scope management. Are we all okay with it? Okay. Okay, so I take it that you all have understood this point. So this was a very brief summary. Now let us go dive a little deeper into the subject and see what happens. Project scope management includes the processes required to ensure that the project includes all the work required and only the work required to complete the project successfully. Now, this is a very important statement that this scope management ensures that the processes included here, they are ensuring that the project includes all the work required and only the work required. All the work required means that to accomplish the goals of the project, all what is to be accomplished is being done. So the work mentioned, the scope of work, the scope of work includes all what is required to be done to meet the objectives of the project. So nothing should be left out. Everything which has to be done must be included, and only the work required should be included, not any useless work which is not contributing to the objective, which is not contributing to the product, which is creating anything which is extra is redundant. So only those things which are in scope must be included, and those things which are out of scope must not be made part of the project. So this will ensure the project is completed successfully. So both things are very dangerous. If what I am creating, what deliverable which I am aiming for, and it requires 10 activities to be done, and I only do 8 activities, that will never give me the desired product. Moreover, if there were 10 activities to be done and I do 15 activities, those 5 redundant activities are out of scope and I am doing extra work and spending extra money and resources just for nothing, because this job could be done in 10 activities. I hope this simple example will clarify what does it mean. So managing the project scope is primarily concerned with defining and controlling what is and is not included in the project. In other words, in short, we are trying to explain here what is in scope and what is out of scope for the project. Okay. So these are the 6 processes I have already explained to you. Let us have a brief definition of each one of these. Plan scope management is the process of creating a scope management plan that documents how the project and product scope will be defined, validated, and controlled. Although the requirement management plan is also created here, but as I said, the bigger plan, the all-encompassing plan is the scope management plan. So how the scope management plan is going to define the products and project scope, validate it, and control it. This is what is the target of scope management. All the subsequent processes of scope management of scope are actually working in tandem with what instructions are provided in scope management plan. As far as the requirement management plan is concerned, requirement management plan is only telling us how to collect the requirements and how to manage them and control them. See, how the requirements can be changed, how the requirements are to be managed and controlled. All this is the subject of requirement management plan. But overall, the bigger thing is the scope management plan, and scope management plan is responsible for defining the scope, validating the scope, and controlling the scope. As far as collect requirements are concerned, the process of determining, documenting, and managing stakeholder needs and requirements to meet the project objectives, naturally in accordance with the requirement management plan as well as the scope management plan. So this is a definition process. But remember, collect requirement is a very important step. Although we do have, when we are given the scope and the business case and all that, we do have a picture about what are the basic requirements. But why are we collecting the requirement? Did the business analyst not collect the requirement? Did these requirements were not clear earlier? Yes, they were. They were. But why are we doing it now? We are just trying to confirm those requirements because we are the people who are actually going to work on those. We are going to manage this project and produce that product. So if some requirement was wrong, then I will be creating a wrong product. So I have to confirm. That's why collect requirements is very important to me. So in collect requirements, we are going to interact with the stakeholder, understand their needs and expectations, and we then in the next step, then we will determine out of the collected requirements the scope of the product first, and then in alignment with the product scope, we will then create the project scope. This all is the job of next process, which is called define scope, and the output is the scope statement. This is the process of developing a detailed description of the project and product. So the product scope and the project scope is defined here. Based on the requirements, we first develop the product scope, and once the product scope has been established, then we define the project scope. Product scope means what all features and functions are to be present in the product. And project scope means what all work is to be done to create the product with those predefined functions and features. So we'll talk more about it. Once the scope statement is created, then it is amply clear. We are actually have already defined what is in scope and what is out of scope. This is just now the matter of explaining it and expanding it a little further, and through 5.4 create WBS, and this process is for subdividing the project deliverables and project work into smaller, more manageable components, which we call work packages. जी जनाब शायद साहब.
सर 5.2 का एक क्वेश्चन है कलेक्ट रिक्वायरमेंट का मेरे पास
जी जी
कि सर हमारी जो इसमें इनपुट्स आ रही हैं हमारी 4.1 से आ रही हैं स्टेक होल्डर मैनेजमेंट प्लान की आ रही
जी जी
लेकिन सर इसमें जो आपकी जो आउटपुट जा रही है रिक्वायरमेंट डॉक्यूमेंट्स हैं और मैट्रिक्स इज डिफरेंट फ्रॉम रेसी.
एक्चुअली लेट मी रीच देयर. अभी तो मैं सिर्फ उसको डिफाइन कर रहा हूँ. मैं इनपुट आउटपुट तक पहुंचता हूँ तो मैं वो एक एक चीज आपको एक्सप्लेन करता हूँ, लेकिन फॉर द टाइम बीइंग मैं अभी सिर्फ उसका रोल बयान करने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ. व्हाट ऑल इज एक्सपेक्टेड आउट ऑफ दीज प्रोसेसेस. आई एम जस्ट डिफाइनिंग.
अच्छा तो मैंने एक बड़ा वाला A3 पे जो एक वो इनपुट आउटपुट वाला सारा प्रोसेस का वो रखा हुआ तो वो सारी इनपुट में. ठीक है सर.
लेट मी रीच देयर. मैं एक्सप्लेन करता हूँ. राइट. So, okay. So once the WBS is created, then I have translated my scope, the product and the project scope, now into, rather I have explained the project scope into my work breakdown structure. Because project scope relates with the work I have to be doing. And the work packages I so design are actually the work of the project which has to be done to meet the product scope. So product and project scope has been established in scope statement, and in WBS I create the breakdown of the work, and that is down to the work package level. When we go on monitoring and control, validate scope is the process of formalizing the acceptance of the completed project deliverable, and control scope is the process of monitoring the status of the project scope and the product scope and managing the changes to the scope baseline. So this is I'm sorry we again broke down the connection, and I'm extremely sorry. The things are going a little bad. Maybe it is due to the weather or something. It is raining outside, and I don't know how does it affect the internet, but somehow it is affecting the internet. So can you listen to me now? I think this will keep happening. Okay, right. So let me move on. So let us move on to the big diagram. Uh, though I'll not discuss it, let me see if that you are seeing the same slide which I'm showing you. It is slow. It is slow. I'm trying to get the slides moving. Yes. Are you able to see this diagram of scope management, all the 6 processes? You must be able to see it now. Yes. So although I'm not going to explain all of these here, but just to address the question of Shahid Saab. Shahid Saab, are you talking about this big diagram?
जी सर.
Okay. What is the question here?
सर 5.2 में क्वेश्चन था मेरा.
जी.
5.2 में जो हम कलेक्ट रिक्वायरमेंट के अंदर है, हमारी जो आउटपुट है वो दैट इज ट्रेसेबिलिटी मैट्रिक्स, रिक्वायरमेंट ट्रेसेबिलिटी मैट्रिक्स, और हम एक और बनाते हैं रेसी मैट्रिक्स, जिसमें हम अपनी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज और हम डिफाइन करते हैं कि किस स्टेक होल्डर ने क्या काम करना है, किसकी क्या रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज है. अब सर दिस इज कलेक्ट रिक्वायरमेंट, लेकिन इस कलेक्ट रिक्वायरमेंट पे आप साथ साथ असाइनमेंट भी करते हैं टास्क की, फ्यूचर टास्क की. आप आइडेंटिफाई करते हैं कि ये वाली वैलिडेशन इस स्टेक होल्डर ने करनी है. यहां से भी एक इनपुट जाती है आपके रेसी डॉक्यूमेंट के ऊपर. तो सर इसमें और रिक्वायरमेंट ट्रेसेबिलिटी मैट्रिक्स में और जो दूसरा प्रोजेक्ट का जो रेसी मैट्रिक्स होता है, उन दोनों में क्या फर्क है?
बेसिकली रेसी मैट्रिक्स जो है that is the job of human resource. I mean that is the job of the resource management. And it has no role here. It has no role here. The thing which is important here is the requirement traceability. So far, you should not be concerned about the role. You should be concerned about the traceability of the requirement. So the requirement traceability matrix, the main purpose is to move backwards and forwards into the life of the requirement. If our requirement is hanging with a thread from inception to the implementation, and you are in between somewhere, you should be able to trace it backwards from where it started, who gave this requirement, and what process it gone through, and how are you going to fulfill this requirement, what are the activities, what are the roles and responsibilities. So there is a linkage to RASI, but as such RASI is not a subject of scope. RASI is a subject of resource management. You understand my point?
जी सर.
There might be an indication here who will do what, right? But that will be referred to the RASI, and RASI is resource management
Main difference is,
architect.
yes, so the main difference is that this is the scope, this is something which you have to perform, and whom to perform, that is the resource management, and at
Exactly.
that time risk comes in.
You
Yeah,
see,
okay. Yeah.
these requirements are not even the scope as yet. These are just the, desires, needs, and expectations of the stakeholders, and we may decide not to do some of these requirements. We may not fulfill some of the requirements. We will negotiate with the stakeholder. We'll talk to them. Well, this is not in the scope of project. Why are you forcing us to do that and all that? And ultimately, many requirements will be dropped out. Actually, what has to be done is the product scope, which will be established in defined scope define scope process. So we are entertaining the stakeholder. We are listening to everything and every desire they have, and we are writing them down, and we are making it, putting it into a requirement document and developing a requirement traceability matrix. But many of these requirements will be dropped out after discussion with the stakeholder when we are
I got it.
developing the product scope. Product scope
Or can
will include the chosen requirements and functions and features only. And based on those product requirements, the project scope will be defined. I hope you understand.
all right. So at this level, yes, yes, sir. So if I reiterate or compare it with the actual environment,
Hmm.
maybe we part where you gather all the requirement, vague requirement, whatever requirement you get, session, you create your mind map documents and your SRS, your technical or functional documents.
Exactly.
This is that level.
Of course, this is going to change. Those
Yeah.
none of those things are ultimate. Right. So we move ahead. We will explain each one of these processes subsequently. Let us move on and see what comes next. Okay. So the project, the term scope can refer to two things, and they are the product scope and the project scope, as I was just discussing with you a while ago. Product scope, what is the product scope? Product scope is when we are talking about the product scope, we are not really concerned about the project scope. First thing to establish is what to be created, and product scope will define the functions, features, specifications, and characteristics which all have to be there in the ultimate product, service, or result. Whatever is the deliverable, so what should be included in the deliverable must be defined here in the product scope. So that does not concern how it will be developed. It just defines what is to be there. So basically, this if we are working in tandem with the business analyst is more concerned about the product scope. He does not concern himself how to do it. He is more bothered about what to do. So product scope is basically the concern of the business analyst. And to tell you the truth, actually, the requirement gathering is also the concern of the business analyst. But because I am the project manager and I have to deal with this project, I will definitely have to confirm the requirements as well as the product scope as if I can start, breaking it down into work, converting into project scope. So my job actually starts once I have a perfect requirement and a perfect product scope. I then break it down into project scope. So project scope is all the work to be performed to deliver the desired product, service, or result with the specified whatever the functions and features were defined in the product scope. With those functions and features, I will create this product. And to create this product, what all I have to do? What all I have to do? We said all the work and only the work. I must be careful to include all what has to be done to create this product and do nothing extra. So all the work which must be done should be included, and all what is not required to be done should not be included. So I will define the in scope and out scope work. Work from the perspective of work, I am saying in scope and out scope work. This is my project scope. So the term project scope is sometimes viewed as including the product scope also. That is one way of looking at it, but basically this is based on product scope. This is not actually project scope is not the product scope. Then we talk about the project life cycle. We have already talked a lot about it. Project life cycle can range along a continuum. We said predictive approaches and then On the other side, and the other extreme could be adaptive or agile approaches. In a predictive life cycle, the project deliverables are defined at the beginning of the project. So when I am doing a waterfall model or a predictive life cycle in which the conventional project management we are doing, there we know what we have to create in the beginning, and we plan for that once and then keep improving on that. So we define in the beginning of the project, and any changes to the scope are then progressively elaborated. This is a normal way of working. But in adaptive and agile life cycle, the deliverables are developed over multiple iterations where a detailed scope is defined and approved for each iteration when it begins. We do not have an overall scope of the whole project in detail. We could have a very sketchy scope, but we are very clear about each iteration we are taking up. So we only focus on the explanation of one iteration at a time, and we keep developing and delivering value. By iteration, we just keep completing the project with no concern how long it will take and what changes are going to be there. We welcome change. Whatever you want to change in future, do keep changing. But the iteration I am doing right now, please don't bother me. Whereas in predictive life cycle, because you are planning for the whole project at once in the beginning, so you do not invite the customer to keep changing things. But still, if anything changes, it goes through a very thorough change control process, and we are not encouraging the changes in a predictive life cycle. Whereas in adaptive, we welcome change. Projects with adaptive life cycles are intended to respond to high levels of change. That is what they are planned for, and require ongoing stakeholder engagement. The stakeholder is always working with you in every iteration, and so he is fully involved with you. The overall scope of an adaptive project will be decomposed into a set of requirements and work to be performed, and sometimes referred to as a product backlog. So product backlog is the kind of a archive, or it's a place where all the work has been stacked. What all has to be done in the project is stacked in order of priority. So this is called a product backlog. Now we are not planning all of that work. We just stacked it in order of priority. So for one iteration, whichever top priority tasks we want to do, we pick that many tasks and we just focus on them. We do not take on the whole product backlog. We just select a few tasks from the product backlog for each iteration, and we focus on that iteration alone. So at the beginning of an iteration, the team will work to determine how many of the highest priority items on the backlog list can be delivered within the next iteration, and uh, it is the team which decides how much they want to pick up and how much they want to do. It is not their project manager or the stakeholder who will define what you will be doing in this iteration. जी शहरियार. जी शहरियार.
हेलो
जी जी प्लीज.
जी सर, एक्चुअली मेरा एक क्वेश्चन था, ये एडॉप्टिव
आवाज नहीं आ रही आपकी.
व्यू एन एग्जांपल। मुझे हमारी कंपनी
Shajan, I'm losing your voice. I can't hear you.
क्या,
I can't hear
कैन
you.
यू एबल टू हियर मी सर?
अभी ठीक है, बोलिए.
Sir, actually, my question is basically with regards to the project timeline for
जी जी
adoptive
जी जी.
मेरा एक स्पेसिफिक क्वेश्चन था कि प्रोजेक्ट की टाइमलाइन कैसे आप स्पेसिफाई करते हैं इसमें, क्योंकि एडॉप्टिव अप्रोच है। अब जस्ट टू गिव यू एन एग्जांपल, सर हमारी कंपनी में अब जिस तरह बिजनेस प्रोसेस ऑटोमेशन का प्रोजेक्ट स्टार्ट हो रहा है,
जी जी.
तो उसमें ना वेंडर को पता है कि क्या कंप्लीट रिक्वायरमेंट है और ना हमको खुद पता है, क्योंकि हमारे
ठीक
लिए
है,
भी एक नई चीज़ है।
बिल्कुल
तो
सही है.
मोस्ट प्रॉब्ली इट विल बी एडॉप्टिव अप्रोच है। तो ये प्रोजेक्ट की लेंथ कैसे आप स्कोप के अंदर डिफाइन करेंगे उसमें? आई मीन कि 1 ईयर में होगा या 6 मंथ्स में होगा या 2
You
ईयर्स में
can't
होगा?
you can't do that.
ओके, वो
ये उसका स्कोप ही नहीं है, ये हम ये चाहते ही नहीं है कि प्रोजेक्ट की लेंथ डिसाइड हो। बेसिकली हमने एक बिल्कुल वेग वेग किस्म की रिक्वायरमेंट दे दी है कि जी हमें तकरीबन एक सिस्टम डेवलप करवाना है। So you are just your customer has just told you that they want to have a kind of inventory system to be developed, and they will keep telling you the requirements over time. So the basic requirements they have provided, and based on that you have given them an approximate time frame, which is not binding at all, which is not binding at all. So now you are asking them to give you the user stories. You discuss with them and you keep getting their user stories, keep stacking them, and you keep picking task for each iteration and keep doing it. You only plan in detail for one iteration at a time. So you cannot commit that it will take 1 year, the whole project will take 1 year. You can't really commit. But you can have a common understanding that generally this work should. So the customer will also be focused on that, and you should also be focused on that. And ultimately, you can both try to not to do more than 1 year's job. But it is not like okay, ji, I'm sorry again. Uh, let
It's
me
fine, sir, actually. Yeah, I can able to hear you.
okay. Let me change the net. Maybe that can help. Just give me a moment.
Sure, sir.
I'm changing the net and will be broken for a while. Maybe this one is good. Right? Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
And now we are on a different net, and I hope this is better than the earlier one, and we can consistently talk to each other. Okay,
Yes, sir.
are
It's
you okay with my explanation?
yes, sir. It makes sense. Thank you.
Most welcome, most welcome. So moving ahead, to key concepts for the project scope management, beginning of an iteration. Three scope processes are repeated for each iteration. I'm talking about Agile. In Agile, for every iteration, you will have to collect requirements. You see, collect requirement is not done in the beginning of the project only. Here we are collecting the requirements for every iteration. Then we are defining scope for every iteration, and we are creating a work breakdown structure for every iteration, right? So this is to be done for every iteration. On the contrary, if we are working on a predictive project, these processes are performed toward the beginning of the project and updated as necessary using the integrated change control process. But here the story is completely different. We are doing these things every time we are starting the iteration. So every 2 weeks, whatever job you are doing for in those 2 weeks, you will be going through all of these processes every time. So your WBS will be a very small WBS of activities, including those 2 weeks and nothing much, not heavy, and it will be easy to handle also. In an adaptive agile lifecycle, the sponsor and customer representatives should be continuously engaged with the project to provide feedback on deliverables as they are created and to ensure that the product backlog reflects their current needs. So, customer is engaged with the project on a continuous basis. Every 2 weeks, they are getting something out of the project. They can review it and they can make up their mind that whether this is acceptable or not, and if it is acceptable, what should be their future requirement. So they can change their future requirement, and we are not really bothered about it what they change, because whatever they change, they will give us the time and energy for that, time and resources for that, and ultimately we will be able to do it. We are just concerned about one thing: what is the next set of jobs we should be doing. And after the acceptance of this first iteration, we can move on to the next iteration. Whatever the jobs are there, we will perform them. So this way, customer representatives are continuously engaged with the project, and they provide the feedback on every deliverable as they are created, and to ensure that a product backlog reflects their current needs, so they can update their requirements. So this continuous feedback, uh, two scope processes are repeated when they are giving the feedback. That is validate scope and control scope. For every iteration, we will be doing the validate scope and control scope. So product scope and project scope for one small little iteration can be managed much easier a job. On the contrary, in a predictive life cycle, validate scope occurs with each deliverable or phase review, and control scope is an ongoing process. In predictive projects, the scope baseline for the project is the approved version of the project scope statement. Work breakdown structure. It's associate WBS dictionary. So predictive, we have got everything uh, framed out in the beginning. जी शहरयार.
नहीं सर, मैं बस एक चीज कमेंट था एक जनरल के जो एडॉप्टिव काइंड्स ऑफ प्रोजेक्ट्स हैं,
जी.
they are more suitable for the pharmaceutical companies या ऑटोमोबाइल इंडस्ट्रीज हो गई जहाँ R&D वर्क रिक्वायर्ड होता है, जब क्योंकि शुरू में आपको पता नहीं होता कि क्या डिलीवरी हो, आप
जी
लेसन
जी जी,
लर्न से लर्न करते हैं.
आप बिल्कुल सही कह
और
रहे हैं, बट
जस्ट अ कमेंट था, कोई क्वेश्चन नहीं
नहीं,
था.
this is very right, and this is forward-looking kind of a comment, because this is what people need to understand, that because they have got changing needs and requirements, therefore they should ultimately shift to agile. Whereas agile for the time being is not considered suitable for such long project, like pharmaceutical project is like 7 to 15 years duration. Only for very small projects which do exist only in IT, where we accommodate them as agile. Otherwise, we are not really comfortable with agile in long-term projects, in construction projects. But, as you are saying, that these kind of projects, no matter how long they must be considering agile, and that is the thinking which must be promoted. But it is interesting.
करेक्ट सर.
This idea of predictive and agile is very interesting for those kind of industries.
यस सर.
Right. So um, completion of the project scope is measured against the project management plan, while completion of the product scope is measured against the product requirement. So you see, we had two types of scopes. One was the project scope and one was the product scope. Product scope was defining what is to be created, and project scope is defining how is it to be created. So when you are going to check the product scope, you will have to compare it against the product requirements you had established at the beginning. When you are trying to check the completion of the project scope, that would be the work which has to be done, and that would be included in the project management plan. So you see, the activities which actually will need to be performed in the completion of the product scope will be the activities of the project scope. So project scope is completed by those activities. So whenever you have to compare the project scope, you have to look at the project management plan, and that is exactly being done by control scope. And what is the validate scope doing? Validate scope is doing the inspection for completeness, and that is about comparing the product requirements. It is comparing the product with the product requirements, so that accomplishes the product scope. So first the project scope is ensured. So once all the work has been done which was required to be done, then the project scope is complete. Then we see the product scope. We validate the scope. Is it complete? Is the product also complete? If product is not complete and the work has been completed, that means we had some problem. It means the the project scope was not well defined in accordance with the product. Or maybe we find that more work has been done than what was required. That means we have overworked, we have done some redundant work. So this is very interesting that the project scope and product scope, when checked, will give out a lot many such kind of findings. The term requirement is defined as a condition or capability that is required to be present in a product, service, or result to satisfy an agreement or other formally imposed specification. As we talked about the validate scope, this is about the product scope. Validate scope is the process of formalizing acceptance of the completed project deliverable. So you see, this is about the product. The verified deliverable, which what is verified deliverable? Verified deliverable is when a product has been passed from the inspection of quality control. So that means it has been found to be correct. The correctness is checked there through this inspection of quality control. Once that has been found correct, this is a verified deliverable. So this verified deliverable comes to the second inspection of validate scope, and here if it is found complete according to the product scope, if it is found complete, then it is accepted by the user and thus is considered as accepted deliverable. One of the outputs of validate scope is accepted deliverable. This is the output that are formally signed off and approved by the authorized stakeholders. That means the customer has received it or it has accepted it. Therefore, the stakeholders needs to get involved early on during planning, sometimes even initiating as well, and to provide input about quality of deliverables so that quality control can assess the performance and recommend necessary actions. So we need the stakeholder to be involved in all this process. So what are the trends and emerging practices? Requirements have always been a concern in project management and have continued to gain more attention in the profession. As the global environment becomes more complex, organizations are starting to recognize how to use business analysis to their competitive advantage by defining, managing, and controlling requirements activities. So you see, if we can somehow, this is our trend that I have also mentioned to you that this product is a concern of business analyst. So business analysis does cross paths with the project management, and even if business analyst is not collaborating or you are not collaborating with business analyst, even then you must find that this is the area which you cross. Both of you are looking at product scope, and product scope is basically the concern of the business analyst. So business analyst will be much more worried about the product scope than you, and you should be more worried about how to complete that product scope through your project scope. So if you want to learn more about these, the harder side of the business analysis, probably you may go through the standards written on the business analysis, and especially one standard which is very important for the project manager as well as the business analyst is the practice guide for requirement management. This explains how the requirements should be collected, all the detailed tools and techniques which can be used for requirement management are given there. So that much for the emerging trends. Then eliciting, documenting, and managing stakeholder requirements takes place within the project scope management processes. So what is eliciting? What is documenting? What is managing? So this all we are talking about is requirement gathering, requirement management. As I said, there is a separate standard on that, and that explains in much more detail as more than what PMBOK is talking about. So if you are really interested and really involved with the requirement management, or you are also doing the role of the business analyst, probably you must read that and follow that. Trends and emerging practices for project scope management include, but are not limited to, a focus on collaborating with business analysis professionals. 5. Number 1, determine the problem and identify the business need. Identify and recommend viable solutions for meeting those needs. Elicit, document, and manage stakeholder requirements in order to meet business and project objectives. And finally, facilitate the successful implementation of the product, service, or result of the program or the project. Collect requirement and elicit requirement. What is the difference between these two terms? Anyone who can help me with that? Collect requirement and elicit requirement. Ji Janab. What is the difference between collect requirement and elicit requirement? Sufyan, can you help me with that? Ji Sufyan bhai. No input from Sufyan. Babar Shahzad. Can you hear me? Babar Shahzad, can you hear me? Anyone who can hear me. I hope I'm not talking in a vacuum. Alize. Aliza, can you tell me the difference between collect and elicit? Okay, Shahriyar, please tell me. I think mic is not working with Aliza. Shahriyar, please.
Yes, sir. Sir, actually, I don't know about LSA. I was
Okay.
just responding on your question. Anybody can hear you, so
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. No problem. No problem. Okay, there is a very simple difference. Aliza, can you help me? Ji. Okay. Mohsin? Saeed Mohsin Ali. Ji, now you can speak, Mohsin. Saeed Mohsin Ali. Okay, fine. That means ke...
Can you hear me now, sir?
Ji?
Sir, as far as the collect requirement is concerned, it is a process of determining and documenting the new requirements to meet the project objectives.
Okay.
And as far as requirement elicitation is, it's a kind of practice of discovering the requirements of a system from users or customers or from the stakeholders.
Right, right. Actually, you are right.
Basically, we can say that the requirement collection is it provides a basis for defining and managing the project scope and product scope as such.
Right, right. Okay, let me explain it. Actually, requ- collect requirement and elicit requirement is used interchangeably. People use it synonymously, but they are not exactly the same. Correct requirement is assumed when you think that people know what they want and they're holding that information in front of them, and you are going there and just collecting it from there. So the information is ready to be given to you. It is all the documents and everything which is to be collected are available. They have segregated and separated them, and they know what they want. So you are just there to collecting the information. But in elicitation, this is when we assume that stakeholder does not know what he wants. He cannot express, and maybe the actual requirement, what should be there, stakeholder is unable to uh, you know uh, say it, or maybe he doesn't even know that this is his requirement. So elicitation is kind of digging that information out of the mind of the stakeholder. When you interview them, when you interact with them, you prompt them with certain data and ask them, is it what you mean? Do you not need that thing or that thing? So that way you try to dig out or scratch out that information from the back of the mind of the stakeholder. Elicitation is a more thorough process, whereas collection is just like a post office. Your postmaster has gone, postman has gone, and he has collected the mail. So assuming that information is already available. So why I'm saying that elicitation is more of a task of a business analyst, because business analyst is the one who is digging deeper into the minds of the stakeholders and discussing in detail, and rather educating the stakeholder and trying to form a big picture for the business case, whether this thing should be done or should not be done. Now, at the stage of the project management, the requirements are pretty much final. The stakeholders know what they want. I, as a project manager, just have to go and collect the information and discuss a bit about any changes. So that is what is the difference between elicitation and collection. And project manager is more concerned about collection, whereas business analyst is more concerned about elicitation. Do I make myself clear a bit? Anybody who has not understood, please raise hand. Okay, fine. So that is a signal that I can move ahead. Okay. The process ends with the requirement closure, which transitions the product, service, or result to the recipient in order to measure, monitor, realize, and sustain benefits over time. Once I have delivered the product to the stakeholder or the customer, then it is presented for checking. They can measure it, they can monitor it, they can realize it, and they can sustain the benefits over time. Now the product has been handed over to them. So this is for them to use it. Naturally, business analysts will remain involved until the benefits are realized. So that is something which business analyst life is more than the project manager. The role with responsibility to conduct business analysis should be assigned to resources with sufficient business analysis skills and expertise. So, as you see, the role of a business analyst is slightly different than the project manager. Project manager has a narrow role as far as the whole picture is concerned. So, business analyst is involved even earlier, and he is involved in the business case, and rather he is involved in the creation of the business case. He is the author of the business case, so he has more expertise. He has to dig deeper. If a business analyst is assigned to a project, requirement related activities are the responsibility of that role. If in your project there is a business analyst associated with you from outside, then product related things like product scope, the requirements, and all that, you would count them towards the business analyst. The project manager then would be responsible for ensuring the requirement related work, that is the project scope, is accounted for the project management plan, and that requirements related activities are performed on time and within budget and deliver value. This much is the responsibility of the project manager in that case. The relationship between the project manager and a business analyst should be a collaborative partnership. They have to work together. Project will have a higher likelihood of being successful if the project managers and business analysts fully understand each other's role and responsibilities to successfully achieve the project objective. Because each project is unique, we are talking about the tailoring consideration. The project manager will need to tailor the way project scope management processes are applied. Considerations for tailoring include, but are not limited to, knowledge and requirement management. You see, the scope, how it applies to your particular project, you may have to tailor it a bit. You may have to align it with your needs and requirements accordingly. So how the knowledge and requirement is managed in your organization and what are your requirements. So don't go in as much detail as PMBOK is saying. Maybe you need to go in lesser detail. Validation and control procedures in your organization and your requirement may be more or less than what is defined in PMBOK. Development approach of your organization, stability of the requirement, what the kind of project you are doing and how stable are the requirements. If the requirements are not very stable, then probably you should be going for a agile approach. If requirements are pretty much stable, then you probably can go for a predictive approach. Then what is the governance mechanism in your organization? What are the good governance practices? How they ensure that the requirements are being fulfilled or not? So that would also govern how you tailor your specific requirements. As far as the knowledge and requirement management is concerned, look at, does the organization have formal or informal knowledge and requirement management systems? Most of the organizations do not have, but if your organization does have, then probably you have to take that into account. What guidelines should be the project manager establish for requirements to be reused in the future? That is, for the lesson learned and the knowledge base you create things you learn from this project. Validation and control. Does the organization have existing formal or informal validation and control related policies, procedures, and guidelines? So, a good organization will have more stringent ways of validation and control, and therefore they may have specific requirements for that. Development approach. Does the organization use agile approaches in managing projects? Is the development approach iterative or incremental? Is it predictive? Will a hybrid approach be productive? So you have to decide on that which approach is most suitable for your organization. So it also depends upon organization to organization. Stability of requirements. If, as I said before, are there areas of project with unstable requirements? So that tantamounts to going for agile. Do unstable requirements necessitate the use of lean, agile, or other adaptive techniques until they are stable and well defined? And governance. Does the organization have a formal or informal audit and governance policies, procedures, and guidelines? Then the considerations for agile and adaptive environment. In projects with evolving requirements, high risk, or significant uncertainty, the scope is often not understood at the beginning of the project, or it evolves during the project. So, uh, this is exactly what we keep doing in projects with evolving requirement, where the requirement is not stable and keeps changing. There is a high risk that whatever, if I fix the scope in the beginning, if I baseline the whole scope of the project, then probably it is going to change and whole of my plan has to be redone. Whole of the project plan, everything will be shuffled. I can't afford that. That takes a lot of time. So why not shift to the iterative agile method, where we can only be focusing on creating that much detail what we can do. Agile methods deliberately spend less time trying to define and agree on scope in the early stages of the project and spend more time establishing the process for its ongoing discovery and refinement. So, a mechanism is present for uh, continuously establishing the scope for the future and working simultaneously on small iterations to produce results. Many environments with emerging requirements find that there is often a gap between the real business requirements and the business requirements that were originally stated. So you see that will become apparent if you are doing it in small iterations. So the business requirement, the gap between the real business requirement and the business requirement which have been given to you, they will be uh, will be catered for in agile. Therefore, agile methods purposefully build and review prototypes and release versions in order to refine the requirements. If you have any doubt how it will look like, then go for a prototype in the beginning. Maybe one iteration could be to create a prototype, and then if the prototype is successful, then we move ahead with the next iteration. As a result, scope is defined and redefined throughout the life of the project. In agile approaches, the requirement constitute the backlog. So all the requirements you have collected so far will go into the product backlog, and then out of the product backlog, you will keep picking the job and keep doing that. So that is for as far as the general topics are concerned. So I've covered them all. So far, are you okay with it? If there are any questions so far, you can ask. Ji Shahid sir.
Sir, I'm okay with the discussion today.
Okay. Okay, we have left with half an hour. Let's move on and see the subsequent processes. Number one process is plan scope management. As we understand, the plan scope management is a process where the scope management plan will be developed as well as the requirement management plan will be developed. And as we defined it earlier, the scope management plan is a process of creating the scope management plan, and that document how the project and product scope will be defined, validated, and controlled. And naturally, we understand that in this process, requirement management plan will also be created. The key benefit of this process is that it provides guidance and direction on how the scope will be managed throughout the project. This process is performed once or at predefined points in the project. So we are talking from the perspective of a predictive life cycle. So in predictive life cycle, the process is performed once in the beginning, and then whenever is required to be amended through change request. So the inputs and outputs and tools and techniques about this are shown here, and let us look at them. I hope you can view this. Now, if you look at it, you will see that it is not very different from the plan project management process. And interestingly, all the management plans are being created on the same pattern. You will, when you are creating a management plan, any management plan, scope management plan, schedule management plan, cost management plan, whatever management plan you are creating, you will always have charter as an input. You will always have project management plan as an input. You will always have enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets as input. And output will show the requisite management plan which you are creating. In this case, we are creating two, and they are scope management plan and requirement management plan. If it was a schedule, if we are working on schedule, then it could have been the schedule management plan. If we were talking about cost, it would have been the cost management plan. Remaining everything is same. The only thing which is going to change is the ingredients of the project management plan, and that would be relevant to what management plan you are trying to create. So if I am trying to create the scope management plan, what is most relevant out of the project management plan is the quality management plan, because the quality requirements are actually captured here in scope management plan, and therefore the quality management plan must be a good input for me. Then the project life cycle and the development approach, which we have defined in the scope statement, or which we will sorry we have defined in the integration in the project management plan, would be very useful for creating that. Even if these things are not available, don't worry, because this is an iterative process, and when they become available, then scope management plan can be further enhanced. So this is one portion of the input which would be different in various cases of management planning. And similarly, as far as we look at the tools and techniques, the expert judgment and the meetings are always going to be there in every management plan. The data analysis is also there, but the ingredients of data analysis may change. Here in data analysis, what we are more concerned about is the various alternatives which have to be identified and analyzed. So, what are the various alternatives for developing the scope and requirement management plan? So, this is quite a bit a simple process. The creating a management plan, although this is a very comprehensive plan, this includes the instructions for doing everything about scope, like how to collect requirements, how to develop a scope statement, how to develop a work breakdown structure, and later on how to validate the scope, how to control the scope. All of that is actually the guideline is provided here, but generally speaking, the inputs, tools, and outputs are almost similar in all the management plans. And the diagram flow, data flow is also quite comfortable, because here we can see from where every input is coming and where every output is going. Project charter is definitely coming from the developed project charter, and quality management plan, life cycle description, and development approach are coming from the project management plan, and enterprise, our organization is giving us the enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets. The outputs which are getting out of it are the scope management plan and the requirement management plan. They are going and adding to the project management plan. So let's talk about first the scope management plan. The scope management plan is a component of the project or the program management plan. Whichever is the parent plan, it is a component of that, and it describes how the scope will be defined, developed, monitored, controlled, and validated. I hope this is self-explanatory. The development of the scope management plan and the detailing of the project scope begin with the analysis of information contained in the project charter, which we have already discussed. The latest approved subsidiary plans of the project management plan, whatever is available, the subsidiary plan means the schedule management plan, the cost management plan, all the management plans which are created throughout the planning, whichever is available, is suitable and available, is going to be used. And historical information contained in the organizational process assets and enterprise environmental factors, these we are going to be using everywhere. So these are our inputs. As far as the charter is concerned, we understand the charter document, the project purpose, high-level project description, assumptions, constraints, and high-level requirements of the project has been defined and is intended to satisfy. This is included in the charter. Then the project management plan. I'm not saying that all of these things will be available, but whatever so far is available will be used, right? And from the project purposes, you understand if something is not available, then I can make certain assumptions. Okay, quality management plan. The way the project and product scope will be managed can be influenced by how the organization's quality policy, methodology, and standards are implemented on the project. You see, we may not have the quality management plan, but we at least can have the quality policy of the organization, and that would be a very good instrument in developing the scope management plan. Then project life cycle approach, whatever kind of iteration you are going through, whatever development cycle you are doing, iterative or waterfall or whatever, and life cycle, we have already discussed about various kinds of life cycle, how the phases are being created in your project, what are the instructions from the organization side. So this all could matter from there. From the enterprise environmental factors, the factors which may affect you in developing the scope could be the culture of the organization, the existing infrastructure of the organization, personnel administration, how the people are being managed in this organization, and naturally from outside world, the marketplace conditions could also impact you. As far as the organizational process assets are concerned, we would be taking help of the policies and procedures and the historical information and lessons learned repository, and we can, consult them for the creation of the scope and requirement management plan. The tools, expert judgment, data analysis, and meeting. So expert judgment, we need to have expertise on previous similar projects and information in the industry discipline and application area. As far as the data analysis is concerned, The data analysis technique that can be used for this process includes but not limited to the alternative analysis. Although this is shown only as one process shown as one option shown for data analysis, but this is not all. You could use any other analysis also if required. This is a tailoring kind of a thing. So what is alternative analysis? Various ways of collecting requirements, elaborating the project and product scope, creating the product, validating the scope, and controlling the scope are evaluated. And out of the various methods, whichever is most suitable for you will be selected alternative for you. Meetings is a standard way of creating any management plan. The project team sits down. They may attend project meetings to develop the scope management plan. Attendees may include project manager, project sponsor, selected team members, selected stakeholders, anyone with responsibility for any one of the scope management processes, and anyone you further require to be present in these meetings. As a result, we will get two things. One is a scope management plan and one is the requirement management plan. And as we already talked about, the scope management plan, the requirement management plan is wrongly written as, okay, let me see. Okay. The requirement management plan is a component of the project management plan that describes how the project and product requirements will be analyzed, documented, and managed. Component of the requirement management plan can include, but is not limited to, how requirement activities will be planned, tracked, and reported. This we are talking about requirements management plan. The heading is wrong. It's not scope management. We are talking about requirement management plan. So how the requirements activities will be planned, tracked, and reported. Process that establishes how the scope baseline will be approved and maintained, and process that specifies how formal acceptance of the completed project deliverable will be obtained. The scope management plan can be formal or informal. Requirement management plan is again a component. Okay, now there is a little problem with this. The previous one was scope management plan, and this is requirement. Headings are slightly wrong. So here the components of the requirements management plan will be how requirement activities will be planned, tracked, and reported, configuration management activities, then requirements prioritization process, how the requirements are to be prioritized, which is the most important requirement, metrics that will be used and the rationale for using them, and the traceability structure, because we will have to develop a traceability matrix that reflects the requirement attributes captured on the traceability matrix. So we move on to the collect requirements process. Collect requirements, as I said, this is more of a business analyst type of job, but even if the project manager is doing it, project manager is just confirming the requirement, and therefore collect requirement is a all right kind of a process, because there is no specific need for eliciting, no more debate is required. We just need to go to the stakeholders and confirm from them that the requirements you have already given, are they okay, are they same, or anything has changed. So collect requirement is the process of determining, documenting, and managing stakeholder needs, requirements to meet the project objectives. The key benefits are that it provides the basis for defining the product scope and project scope, because based on these requirements, the product scope will be established, and based on the product scope, the project scope will be established. This process is performed once or at predefined times, naturally in a predictive life cycle, and the inputs, tools, and techniques for collect requirements are shown here. Although they are very small, so you have to slightly pay attention here, or you can look at it on your PMBA. Okay. So the input is the charter. Naturally, in the beginning, this is a second process, and in planning after scope management plan, this is the second process, and collect requirement has nothing to start with, and therefore charter is required for collect requirements also. And when we will be developing the scope statement, there also define scope, we will also need to have a charter. So charter is required for these two processes. Project management plan, whatever items are available in project management plan, that is the scope management plan is available, the requirement management plan is available, and also we need to interact with the stakeholders, so stakeholder engagement plan should also be available in whatever format it is. Then we need to have certain project documents if they are available. The assumption log has started getting created as soon as the charter was developed. So whatever assumptions so far we have collected, they will be an input. Lessons learned register will be an input. Stakeholder register will be an input. And business documents, we will take the business case, because as I said, this is more of a business analysis problem. Collect requirement, we will have to refer to the business case created by the business analyst. Agreements, whatever agreements under which we are working, I mean, it's not with our subcontractor, it is with our customer. So whatever agreement or MOU or whatever type of contract we are having, so we have to take that into account. Enterprise environmental factor and process assets will also be input. The tools and techniques we have naturally is the expert judgment. Data gathering, we have a number of tools to cater for, because in data gathering we will have to resort to each and every of them. We have to do the brainstorming through group creativity techniques. We have to interview people. We have to talk to people in focus groups. We have to, if the people are more, then we may have to float questionnaires and surveys. And we also need to have to do sometimes the benchmarking to see how our competitors are behaving in this area. Data analysis, we may do the document analysis. In decision making, we can use voting and multi-criteria decision analysis. When a group is making a decision, then probably to gain consensus, we can have voting, or we can have a formula defined for multi-criteria, and we can base our decisions on that. How the data is to be represented, there could be mind maps or affinity diagrams. Mind maps are something is kind of a creativity tool which will map everything on a piece of paper showing their linkages. An affinity diagram is a similar kind of a thing. How what is the affinity of one item on another? How much influence one item has on another? Then interpersonal and team skills, which are definitely required. You are going to be dealing with so many stakeholders, so you will be, dealing with nominal group techniques, observation and conversations, and facilitations. We'll talk about these. Then is the context diagram, prototypes, and ultimately the output would be the requirement documentation and requirement traceability matrix. Requirement document will include all the requirements collected are confirmed so far, and requirement traceability matrix would be a kind of a table which will show the journey of the requirement right from source till its destination. So we can track any requirement from its source till the activity it is to be performed. So far we have not created the activities, but ultimately when the correct activities will be defined, when the roles will be defined, they will be linked with this traceability matrix. On a data flow diagram, we can see all the inputs coming from various places, and they are getting into the project documents. So both of these things, the requirement document and requirement traceability matrix, will go into project document. None of them is going into project management plan. Okay, I think I would like to leave it here, and I can start tomorrow right from the same place. I can revise 5.2 in the beginning also. So if you can allow me, we can finish the class right here. Gina, what is your opinion? Should we leave? Gina. It looks like that many people do not want to leave. Only Azim and Shahid Saab has confirmed, or maybe others are not there. Yeah, now I'm getting the response. Okay, gentlemen, fine. We can have questions tomorrow. So we can call it a day and we can discuss these things tomorrow. So see you tomorrow. Thank you very much for your company. and great day. Thank you very much. Take care. Khuda Hafiz.